Good afternoon, everybody. It's 12 o'clock, and so I think we're going to get going. Thank you for coming to listen to our weekly Wednesday webinar. We have a particularly exciting session this week with our physiology team, headed at the moment in this particular project by Richard Brooksbank and Chloe Dafkin, who looked at what they had and looked at what they wanted and have come up with a really interesting solution to helping their students learning physiology. They particularly are working with a group of second-year students. I can see that we have a whole lot of people in the webinar today who are teaching in similar contexts. And so what I'd like you to do is listen to how this project came about and what they did, and what were their successes and what were their absolute failures. And if you don't mind, if you hold on to your questions, or you can type them in the chat until they finish their presentation, so that you've got the whole story, and then we can talk about what other people can do and how people can get involved, and where as an we can take this kind of work. So I do want to congratulate them at the outset. This team are the winners of this year's PV Tobias Convocation Teaching Excellence Medal, and deservedly so for the short amount of time that they managed to put this project together and actually help their students. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Richard and Chloe, and ask them to share their screen and tell us what they've done, and then we can take it from there. Thanks, guys.
Sure.
Okay, we can see your slides. Thanks.
We've got your slides. Great, thank you. Welcome. Thank you for attending, coming to listen to our talk. We'll both be presenting. So I'm Richard Brooksbank.
And I'm Chloe Dafkin.
We'll alternate. Hopefully we've got it down pat. We don't talk over each other, but we'll work through. We'll work through it as we go along. So Chloe's going to start and really just take you from the beginning of how we started. We came on the idea of Phizzle Bot and how we will go talk you through how we put it together. Some of you may have heard this in some other presentations we've done in the faculty, but we'll take you a bit beyond that, because since those times, since we last presented, there have been some developments, and we can take you through those as well. So a bit of an update as well. So Chloe will start.
Thanks, Richard. I'm just going to turn off the camera now that we've greeted everyone. So I'm going to start with a little bit of the story of how we got to this point. So as Richard said, I do apologize. A lot of you might have already heard the story, but for those who haven't, it's a nice place to start. But basically, we had the idea, we had the instruction that we should be using AI in teaching. And then we were debating amongst ourselves what's the best way in which to do that. So at some point, I was sitting at night rocking my child to sleep, and I was thinking, what is a good way to use AI without just relying on the classic ChatGPTs and the generative AIs that are already out there? And I thought, wouldn't it be better if we could have our own AI that we have trained on our content, so that we would have a little bit more control over the information that the AI has? So that was the first initial seed of thought that we had. So I mentioned it to Richard, who was like, okay, let's keep this between us and we'll discuss it. And we were like, this would be great, but we thought there would be a lot of hurdles keeping us from being able to achieve this. So as neither of us are that skilled at programming, we were like, okay, is it going to be possible for us to be able to do this? So the first thing we did was we hopped onto Google and we were like, how easy is it to create chatbot, to build your own chatbot. And Google came back with, oh no, it's really easy. So we were like, okay, well, if it's really easy, then we should be able to do it. So we did a little bit of searches, we went through the literature, and it didn't seem like there was a lot of education specific chatbots at the time. So at the time that we were looking into it, there were a lot of university customer service bots, but less so specifically focused on education. So we came across one paper that had made a bot for anatomy or anatomy content. And they showed in that paper that the students preferred using that bot over using the publicly available ones like ChatGPT. I think that was the specific comparison that they did in that paper. So the next thing we had to do was find a site or a subscription form that we could use in order to host or build our own bot. So we did a little bit of research on that, and we came across a specific engine, which a specific site, a paid subscription site, which was Chat. So we will show you a little bit about that a little bit later.
COVID, we had generated a lot of videos. In fact, we generated videos, lecture videos, for all of our topics in second year. So we had a resource that covered our entire course that was in a digital form, but we still didn't know that how we realized we couldn't train our chatbot on videos. So we were left with a bit of a conundrum. But about the same time, I was teaching liver, as you can see from this slide, and I was mucking around on Allwazi and uploading videos to Studio. And I noticed, which many other people are familiar with, that you could make a transcript of all of your videos. So we could get each video that had been produced and then generate a transcript from those videos. And then perhaps we thought we could use those to train a chatbot specifically on our material so that it would serve our needs and address our objectives. So we generated, systematically, we generated transcripts for all of our lectures. And we ended up with something that looks like this, which, as you can see, is not ideal. This is from one of my lectures on acid-base balance. And because people have different accents and teach different, speak differently, it does have some rather weird interpretations of what it is. So from my transcripts of one of my acid-base lectures, this is what came out. And it's not ideal. It's H plus instead of H plus, Argentines instead of H plus ions, and so on. We thought, oh dear, we can't use these as a transcript because the AI is going to, the chatbot's going to speak nonsense. So we had the idea of running these through ChatGPT again, and seeing if we could clean them up. And what happened with this particular section, if you put it through ChatGPT and ask it to make a summary and clean it up, this came out, which is a much more succinct description of what it was I was trying to say in my online lecture. But the material is there. So we were happy with this. We did this with all of our transcripts. And for each one of those transcripts, which is equivalent of each lecture or each video, ChatGPT generated some very nice summaries, transcripts of all of our lectures, which we went through and checked for accuracy and corrected a few. Each series of very clean and accurate transcripts from all of our lecture videos, which we felt were good enough to train our chatbot with, which we then proceeded to do systematically. What's next? Okay. Which we then placed on Chatbase. We trained Chatbase up with it, and in that way we managed to generate Phizzle Bot, this is how it appeared on the first instance that we did it. And we're going through, yeah, okay.
And then we decided, okay, we have this product that we've created, but now we obviously need to give the students access. And what was the best way to do that? To keep it as an in-house system and make sure that only our students could access it. So we decided the best way to do this was actually to embed the bot into Ulwazi. So you can see over here is a page from Ulwazi, from one of our courses, where we actually embed the bot on there. So there's a little button for Phizzle Bot, and this is what the students see. So they'll get a nice welcome to Phizzle Bot, and then they could freely engage with the bot as it was going. So what happened then is that we had a little bit of a debate amongst the staff of if we should or shouldn't release the bot for last year, for 2024. So that would be just around test 4. And we did have a little bit of discussion on the fact that, you know, should we add a new tool this close to the end of the year? Is it just going to overwhelm them? Are they going to have too many things to deal with? So that's pretty much where we were debating it. But eventually we came to the conclusion that the students were already using generative AI in order to study, but they were using external sources, which we had no control over. And by us giving them this additional source, it wouldn't be adding an extra thing for them to do. It would be replacing something that they were already using with hopefully a better tool. So towards the end of 2024, we launched the bot to our second year students so they could use it in preparation for test 4 and then as well as the exam. And over here on these analytics, you can see that there was a massive uptake from the students. The students took to it straight away. So they had no issues getting used to the tool or using it. And there we've just indicated where those two spikes are, is that you can see the usage obviously before test 4 and then before the exam. So they were definitely using it as a study aid in preparation for their assessments. And then after that, we were like, okay, well, since this was a pilot in essence, that we were using a new tool, educational tool with the students, we wanted to get some feedback from them in order to gauge the usefulness of the tool and if we should move forward with developing it. So we, towards the end of 2024, we did get some feedback from the students. So the class reps at the time canvassed the class and they did get us a little bit of feedback, which is summarized on the slide over there. And you can see that firstly, we received like no negative feedback on the use of Phizzle Bot, but also that the students really liked the conversational aspect to it, the clear answers. They found that it improved their understanding, helped them do better, and also that it gave them quick responses, so they didn't have to wait to hear these ideas. So overall, it was very positive feedback that we received from the students. So moving into 2025, we decided that because Phizzle Bot had done so well, that we would launch it for all of our second year courses for 2025, which is about 1,200 students, roughly, maybe a little bit more. So that's how many currently have access to Phizzle Bot. And then at the beginning of the year, we thought in order to level the playing field amongst the students, because they're obviously all coming in with a different base level of knowledge on the use of AI, we did in their introductory lecture, we did about a half an hour session on AI literacy with a specific focus on Phizzle Bot and using Phizzle Bot. So we gave them a little bit of a tutorial on it, a little bit of an introduction to it to make sure that they would all know the optimum ways in which to use Phizzle Bot. And we also produced this guide, which has a few examples, almost like the do's and don'ts. So good ways to engage with the bot, bad ways to engage with the bot. And we posted this, we did have a written document that we gave to the students so they can look at it whenever they want to. Because obviously, as we all know, during an introductory lecture, they're probably barely paying attention to anything that we're saying anyways. They're going to forget. So they do have that guide as well, which has useful examples for them on ways to engage with the bot. Then, so far, these are the analytics for 2025. So as you can see, the bot, since the beginning of the year when the students started using it, has sent about 87,000 messages to the students. So, I mean, that's a very impressive number in the amount of work that the bot is doing. So we did have a rough calculation that if we accounted each response to a student to take about roughly 5 minutes for a human or a lecturer to do, that this would relate to about 18 full-time academic staff members answering questions from students from 8 till 5 every day. Which obviously, none of us are capable of doing that amount of response to the students. So this obviously saves a ton of time for the lecturers that don't have to deal with these questions because the students are going to the bot. And the other thing that we picked up is that as a lecturer, so I have been lecturing for quite a while now, you don't actually receive that many questions because the students might have a little bit of not distrust, but a little bit of shyness. They don't, a little bit of fear that they don't want to come and ask the lecturer something. They don't want to appear dumb or that they don't know something. So they won't ask the questions that they're thinking. Whereas the bot solves this problem because it's a non-judgmental space where they can go and ask whatever questions they want, and they don't have to worry about what somebody else might think of them. So that way, I think it's a huge asset as well. So here again, you can see for 2025, it's following a similar pattern in the analytics with the massive spike, obviously, before test 1. And we are predicting, and I have seen already, that there's an uptick in usage as we're starting to approach test 2 now. So here, these are some screenshots of student interaction that we have from the bot that we've taken. And here we just took a few. These are actual student conversations, but we just took a few as examples. So on the left here, you can see a student asked for something to be summarized in point form. And then on the right, you can see that a student was asking for assistance in memorizing something. So good ways to remember the information, where Phizzle Bot then makes some nice mnemonics for them in terms of remembering that information. And here you can see there's one where the bot was making a table. So we use that as an example to show you a table that the bot was making. And then over here we have that the bot actually makes quizzes for them, so they can study some of their content. Then they go into that. So basically they would study the content, then they would go to the bot and they would say, oh, like, can you quiz me on this information? And then the bot generates a quiz for them, which they can then answer and then get marked feedback from the bot straight away. Then the next one we have is actually just showing a little bit of how the bot also supports the student. So it does provide a little bit of an emotional context or attachment to them. So this student was saying, oh, I'm feeling a little bit frustrated, like the work is just getting to me. So they just said, where? And the bot was like, okay, I think you might be overwhelmed. Is there anything specific? And you can see how it comforts the students and encourages the students. And this one over here is also, I think this was like last week, that one of them was saying, I have you to thank for my strong understanding because not so long ago I was clueless. And then obviously the bot's like, oh, I'm delighted to hear that. But it's nice to see that the students are forming relationships in a sense with the bot so they're comfortable to speak to it. Then I think we'll save a demo of the bot for a little bit later on. But I'm going to pass over to you, Richard.
Okay, so in the interim, since we first launched this, we have interacted with some other colleagues in the faculty and presented to a couple of groups, including the School of Pathology Teaching and Learning Group. And there have been some other bots have been generated from our interactions based on the same ideas. We ourselves have generated a bot we call Qbot, which is capable of producing assessment questions. It's for use by staff in physiology. We've trained it to produce questions in the question formats that we use in our assessments. That's been quite successful. Maurice Nyambuya from Molecular Medicine has developed his own bot called Mollybot, which is similar to Phizzle Bot, but focusing on the molecular medicine content of the course. And then an interesting application has been at the Wits Law Clinic, where Alicia Raymond has developed a bot as a training aid in her practical legal studies refugee unit at the Wits Law Clinic. And the way that is used is quite interesting, which we will investigate future and hopefully report back to you a bit later on. Also, Eileen Deploy from eFundati also approached us, and I believe has developed a bot for use in eFundati. I just don't have the details of that at the moment. Yeah. So we have generated obviously this is a potential research tool because it does allow us to get an insight into various aspects of student interactions and knowledge seeking that they might do through Phizzle Bot. So we have had some ideas to looking at physiology, Phizzle Bot usage patterns, for instance. We need to determine whether or not Phizzle Bot actually is just a study aid, or does it actually bring about changes or improvements to student marks? And also, I think very interestingly, which we have students now researching, is do the transcripts because Phizzle Bot keeps a complete record of what it is that students have asked and the chats that they have had with Phizzle Bot. Anonymously, of course. Can we use those interactions that the students have had with Phizzle Bot to try and get some insight into areas of physiology that students might feel particularly difficult, or words based on the frequency of use and so on. So we're investigating that now. We've just recently obtained ethics to look at some of these questions, so we will be going full ahead on some of these research questions. Of course, there's so many others we could be investigating as well, and you guys might have some ideas as well. So that's where we are with Phizzle Bot. Now, I think just to bring your attention, obviously we are using a commercial interface to host our bot, which is called Chatbase, which is based in Canada. We chose Chatbase for no obvious reason other than it was one of the first ones that came up. But since then, we have done some investigations into other alternatives. They're all of what would suit us is much the same cost. But there is a cost involved, which I think is the point I want to mention. We had to subscribe to Chatbase. It costs $150 a month, which is about $1,500 a year. We get 2 months free, but that's about 20,000 Rand subscription costs for the bot. With that, we get 12,000 messages, and messages are the currency of the chatbot. So for every one of those replies that Phizzle Bot gives to a student, it counts as one message, and that's how the charge works, basically. If we exceed the 12,000 messages, then we have to have a top-up subscription, and we can top up by $9 per 1,000 messages. But you can do the sums. If you can see that we've done nearly 90,000 messages in 4 months, we've exceeded our 12,000 subscription quite a lot. So we're continuously topping this up, and we reckon that we reckon that probably in total the cost for just our bot with the usage will be about 40,000 Rand a year, which isn't bad. But we would like to remove ourselves from 2 aspects. One is the licensing agreements that we have to subscribe to in terms of Chatbase, which restricts how we can use or take advantage of the chatbot itself, and the costs, of course. So where to next in terms of development of a chatbot? We would really like to get out of this being obligated to a commercial service and develop our own chatbot interface, which could be used to host our chatbots, but any others that are developed at WITS, and would save considerable costs, although there will be some developmental costs involved. We know how to do this. We're just trying to find. Okay, I'm back. So yes, that's really is where we're at with with Phizzle Bot and similar chatbots and that sort of approach. So I think we could take some questions now. I'd like to do that.
Perfect, guys. Thank you so very much. That was a tour de force. Really, you didn't spend time on how long it took to make those decisions and how to get where you were going. So we're really well done for just diving straight in. I'm really interested to know if people are keen on collaborating on this kind of research, or if you're thinking about using this approach in assisting your own students, and how you think that it could be useful. So I'm opening the floor for questions. If people want to ask about any aspect, including how often you were up at 2 a.m. crying your eyes out. Shada, we can start with you.
Hi, Shira. I'm always asking questions. Thank you, Chloe and Richard. I mean, we sat through a presentation. I'm part of the pathology department's SPAT committee, and they gave us this presentation last year, and we were all wide-eyed and really impressed. And the enthusiasm was just contagious, and we all were really excited to implement this. So we actually do have integrated pathology bot that we going to use for GEMP, so that's for our medicine students. So what I actually wanted to ask Chloe and Richard is, how do they, or are they using the strategy of keeping a human in the loop? Because we know that chat-based allows you to modify answers. Are they having somebody review the answers to the queries from the students?
Thanks. So we both personally look at the chat, so I do keep a close watch on what the bot is saying and what engagements the students are having with it. But I will say, once we released it this year and we're getting like 87,000 responses, it's basically like every minute. So I can't read all of them, but I do read the general gist of, to pick up patterns myself. So when I was teaching, to maybe see if the students were asking the same thing a lot, then I'd be like, okay, clearly they missed this in the lecture, let me go over it in the TUT or whatever it might be. So I do personally watch the chats quite a bit. So there is still the person engagement coming, I suppose, just from me and Richard at this point.
Okay, thanks. Just another question. I mean, the cost is a bit of a challenge, and I don't know if the faculty has specific funding, because I suspect other people would want chatbots. So, I mean, we managed to get funding, but if there is a specific funding source somewhere for these kind of bots or development of these kind of AI tools for our students.
So Shada, can I jump in there and just say that, of course, the university is very keen on establishing how it is that we could be using AI to assist our students. And we currently have university capacity development grant funding for a generative AI project, which is going into its second phase. The first one was just an establishing of what people know about it and who's using what among staff and students. And they're about, within the next 2 weeks, to put out a call to ask for projects where people will be making a financial ask. So I can't tell you exactly how much each one of those sub-projects will be funded to the tune of, but it would certainly cover what this general Phizzle Bot cost. So, in the region of something like 100,000 Rand for a year's project. But, capacity development grant is just that. It's seed funding so that the university can get things going, but then it has to be supported by the university. And the approach that they've taken so far for any of the capacity development grants is, if your department is doing it, then you have to find the funding to continue it once your grant funding is complete. So I think that we need to do a lot more collaboration. We do have a subcommittee of the Educational Technologies Committee that is specifically concerned with generative AI, as you know. And I think that we should be communicating through that committee about what people are going to be asking for and what research they'd like to do and what projects they'd like to do, so that we can maybe get the most out of it, and also so that then our senior management and leadership is aware of the kinds of things that we're doing, so that when it comes to the ask of continuing the project, that they're on board with allocating funding to that. So in a nutshell, that's the moment where we stand with funding.
Cheryl, we did approach the WITS Innovation
Yeah.
Hub office. They recommended we apply for the Technology Innovation Agency grant, which we did for quite a substantial amount. It's very much related to commercial applications of technology innovation, and unfortunately we didn't convince them on that aspect, so we were turned down. But yeah, we haven't had much more luck from the innovation group at all. I must say they've sort of gone quiet on us, but there are funding opportunities out there for such things. I think we just need to fine tune our approach. But I do think it would make a substantial difference to what it is that we can deliver to students, because obviously once we've got our own system set up, then there's no cost to students or the university. It's just that initial development, and a server maintenance or whatever that may be. So I think it really is the way forward to increasing our capacity and reducing our costs.
Yeah, because when we were working on that grant application, we did a lot of research into it, and we have people that have these skills in order to build our own interface. And if we could get the funds for the initial layout of the hardware, for the servers and such things to run these, there's no reason why it couldn't host bots for the whole university.
What I didn't realize is there's open source LLMs like Llama and so on, which you can use, and they can incorporate into an interface at very little cost, and would certainly do the job. So technically, we know how to do it. It's just the development that would cost the money at the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's where collaboration is really important, because you know that we have a whole AI unit that's been there for the last 20 years in our computer science department. So they've been very ahead of the curve in knowing about the back end of a lot of the kinds of things that obviously we'd be wanting to do. So there's the large language model idea on the one side, there's the bot capacity on the other side, and then there's your specific content subject knowledge. So I think that by understanding what everybody's doing, or at least knowing what's out there, and that's why these seminars are really useful, because people can see with what energy it took to get it going, but what the rewards are for doing it. And also to try and head students off from just using Google to give them their answers, because they'll know they'll get an AI summary for everything, but you then don't know what it is that's going on with them. So I think that
we didn't stress was that the bot just accesses our information. It doesn't go out into the big wide world. So what gets fed back to students is very specific and focused on our content. I'm not sure if
I think that's probably one of the strongest things about it, is that you know exactly what the answers are going to be from what you've fed into it. So your training, in other words, has ring-fenced what it is the students are going to be seeing. Yeah, so I mean, I love that idea, because at least then you can close the loop. As Chloe says, when she starts seeing a whole lot of questions around one particular area, well, that's obviously an area where a TUT could be held, or where you can emphasize when you're going through something else. And yeah, I guess what we think students are learning from what we're giving them and what students kind of do get in the end are two completely different things. So having something in the middle that mediates what's going on and gives information on both sides of the teaching learning equation is, I think, actually really useful.
Sorry, I have another question.
No, don't apologize. Go ahead.
Richard and Chloe, are you thinking of perhaps a more multimodal chatbot, something that can generate images? Have you guys explored that?
We have explored it a little bit. There is no real facility to do that very effectively at the moment. You know what AI images are like. They can be a bit weird. So for something as technical and information, specific, there's nothing available at the moment. However, having said that, I have absolutely no doubt there will be soon. So we'll just wait for that to come along, and we'd obviously like to incorporate that.
Yeah, the challenge will obviously be as well is the cost of the generation, which will really impact the credits. So I think, for now, the text is just to note that this is a text generator.
I think, without specific information, we're quite fortunate that physiology itself lends very well to a text explanation. Whereas I know with pathology and with anatomy, sometimes it is a little bit more reliant on images.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about image capacity, especially in relation to other products. Judy, I did see your hand up, so I'm not going to carry on with the image idea. You're welcome to ask your question, and then we'll round up completely.
Yeah, thanks, Shira. Now, I just wanted to congratulate Richard and Chloe. It's really exciting, especially for us who are no longer involved very much in teaching and learning. So it's fantastic, and I'd really be interested in look, they're using it as a study aid at the moment. And the whether this actually changes how they perform in physiology would be very interesting to see. So I want to just wish you all the best with that study. I do want to ask, in the longer term, this obviously could affect student fees, don't you think? It's just a question. In the olden days, we would have tutors, and I suspect this kind of, the Phizzle Bot, for example, will erode the whole old tutor system that we had and the charges to students. So how would this in the long term perhaps affect student fees, or how would we have to think about the tuition fees to sustain the cost around
that scribble down sort of calculation, and at the time it worked out to about 80 Rand per student per year, roughly. So it's not. That would be in their miscellaneous fees. So we charge their lab fees and so on. So that would be in their printing. If we stop printing, then they would easily cover that. So I think it could go that way without being too noticeable, have too much of an impact. But nonetheless, if we can do it for a much cheaper cost, that would be advantageous to everybody.
Yeah, great stuff. Well done and congratulations.
Thanks, Judy.
Thanks.
Shirama, I just mentioned just one other thing I haven't mentioned at all is the language capacity of the bot. It will answer questions in any language you choose to ask it, just about. It had a bit of trouble with vendor, apparently. But we've tried it with many different languages, South African languages, European languages, and it gives back a physiologically accurate answer in the language that the question is posed. And that's a huge feature of it, which is built in as part of LLMs, which has maybe another aspect in terms of multilingual teaching, and we haven't really investigated that yet.
And also just in terms of tutoring, like Judy was saying, which is something that we tell the students as well. We're like, think of Phizzle Bot as like your own personal tutor that you carry around in your pocket, basically, that can respond to you in your home language, so in the language that you're most comfortable with.
Yeah, I think that's a phenomenal capacity, and you really, really have to add that to your research questions about the influence of learning, I would say, formal concepts in your mother tongue. And then being able to extrapolate that into answers in a different language, which I think is very exciting for the students. Also far less alienating. So if you're dealing with what you feel is a face that you can't see beyond the screen, basically. It's nice to be able to use your own language, and I agree that's an incredible strength of what you've done with Chatbot. Questions from everybody else? I sense a lot of, oh, wow. but you might want to think about practical things. Robin, go ahead.
Hi there, thanks. Yeah, thanks. That was an amazing achievement by you, and I'm envious after we've tried to start it in pharmacology. I was just wanting to find out from you, if, for example, you were on the one platform and we've started on another one, and then now we want to consolidate it into a WITS platform, what's going to happen with the migration of the information? Is there sort of maybe a consensus that we should maybe start on a similar program or the same program? It's just a concern that we're going to then duplicate the information if we want to amalgamate.
Presuming you trained it on text-based information, that's just as long as you've got those sort of raw files or documents available, you can use that to train any facility, any application. They'll all work the same. So that as long as you've got that raw foundational information, it doesn't matter what interface you're using.
There would obviously still be the nuanced responses that there were a few things, that the bot was a little bit more American than we would have liked, so we had to change a little bit of its phrasing. But those kinds of things, unfortunately, would probably have to be retrained into the new system. However, it would just be a one-time undertaking, and it would have massive cost-saving benefits. So I think at this point, it doesn't really matter what server you're using, as long as you're keeping a record of the files that you use to train it.
Okay, excellent. Thanks a lot.
And in fact, I think that Robin, that's part of the group discussion that our faculty EdTech group needs to take on board, is just to gauge the interest of how many of particularly these translational science departments have got that kind of training that they'd like to do across the board. I think we also have to think about students and the ways that students learn. You don't want them to get tired of using a bot. They need to be seeing it as something that's assistive to them, but also trained for the particular departments that are, wanting them to answer in special ways. So I think that rather than bombard students with only bots, we need to work really hard on the idea that students are using bots for their learning, but that we can close the loop in terms of the kinds of questions that they're asking and where the problems seem to be. So I'm quite keen on the idea of all of us talking before we all launch into our own individual kind of subject-based bots, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, sure. I think the other aspect is we have these transcripts now, which is an incredible resource for many other ways to use AI. We don't quite know how to do that yet, or how we might use that, but there's these things where you can make podcasts out of documents and so on. There's many other ways to express the same information, and I think those are going to develop over time as well, not just in chatbots.
No, I think that's brilliant. And I mean, that's exactly the point, is that at the moment, we don't know where this can go. And that you have this data, I think, is really useful in leading the rest of us, but also in people coming to you with ideas of what could be done. Ashay, I saw you had your hand up a while ago.
Yeah, hi there, Kira. So it was along the lines of what Robin was talking about. So it was around integration of courses instead of one single course of physiology. What's the possibility of integrating it along with like anatomy or molecular medicine? So having like an overall chatbot, but instead of having it for one course, you have it for multiple courses. And I think that will increase cost efficiency in terms of having funding for the project. So if it's relatable to all disciplines or all courses, then the likelihood is increased. So my question was, have they thought about integration across courses for Phizzle Bot? Thank you.
We have. That was definitely a consideration. But at the end of the day, the reason that we decided to keep it more isolated was actually for the research purposes. So it would be much harder to tease out the impacts for a specific course or for specific results that the students are getting if we had one bot that was covering all the different topics that the students were doing, which was the main reason that we kept it. But there's no reason why you can't add all the content for all of the different subjects into one bot.
Yeah, although having said that, you will start getting less specific answers for a particular course. So if we were talking about second messages in physiology, we go, well, cyclic AMP and so on, whereas molecular medicine will go all the way down the chain with kinases and phosphatases and so on, which is not information we in physiology require them to know, but presumably a query in that area would pull up all of the information and deliver it to them, which is almost what we're trying to avoid by having our own content on the chatbot. So yes, I think there's cost savings. What the bot would deliver if it was all integrated may or may not be what we actually wanted to produce.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there. It's like having an incredibly all-knowing friend. Ashay, you want to pick up on it still?
So my understanding was, is there no way like to code the database as soon as you refer to one aspect of maybe physiology, it draws onto the database of physiology. But if like say for example, I speak about a concept that's related to PCMP, to clinical medical practice, then as soon as it sees that term there, it will look into the database for PCMP and pull out all relevant information from there, instead of going to different databases and having somewhat of a
I'm sure that
frequency
architecture can be, I'm sure that can be set up, and the people we've been investigating this with would know exactly how to do that.
I think the major problem would be that there is so much overlap between the subjects. So it's much harder, specifically in a health science aspect, for it to say, oh, this term is specific to whatever subject, because if you asking something about the heart, it's going to cover molecular medicine, it's going to cover anatomy, it's going to cover physiology. So I think that would become a little bit difficult to pick up exactly which topic they were asking about.
But Chloe, I mean, for me, that speaks to students integrating, across courses. We want them to be able to see kind of the bigger picture.
Yeah, definitely.
And in then mandating where an answer needs to come from. When we see the integrated exams, for example, in the GMP, students would understand if a question was asked as functional physiology, that they need to answer in one way, as opposed to pharmacology, they need to answer in another way. And students can tell basically which department set the question by the way that it's been asked, even if they're dipping into the same data set to answer it for themselves. So it's always interested me that they keep the knowledge of which department asks then depends on the kind of answer they're going to give. And maybe having a system like this, especially if we work on the integrative idea of saying, if you were answering it from this perspective, this is the kind of level you need to know. And if you're answering it from another one, this is what you have to give as an answer, speaks more to the discourse of a particular subject, like being a physiologist, rather than the integrated medical experience of this is a medical applied question. And I think that there's a huge space for research there as well, because we're looking at what content, to what level, to what purpose of performance of the student, and putting it all together maybe gives one set of students a different perspective than another set. So the different professions even that we're teaching might need different approaches to just that same data set. So I mean, I think there are endless possibilities to look
definitely.
At how it is. Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting excited.
So I think if we had our own in-house server, then I mean the costs, we could pretty much have as many bots as we wanted, and then that would give us a lot of room to play with those kinds of ideas of having maybe a physiotherapy specific bot that focuses on their content, and then a medical bot that focuses maybe on the game content, and those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're saying it comes down to money, although time, idea, initiative, and energy. And yeah, I do have to echo Judy that the fearless enthusiasm that you guys had in just saying, "Can't we do this thing?" Is very exciting.
Just one of those things that came together. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wished I lived in this time 100 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions, anybody? You've really, I think you pressed a lot of people, guys. It's lovely to see it come together, and you're presenting it as something that happened. But I know that along the way you had a lot of teething problems of deciding how things were going to be done, and you made great choices along the way, but they were definitely choices.
Well, experience comes with that. You know, we've taught and we know a lot about students over the years, so it's that certainly helps direct you a little bit. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Is there anybody else who wants to ask a question specifically about Phizzle Bot or the faculty AI project in general and how we're trying to assist people? I'm not seeing that. So I do have to tell you right at the beginning of the chat, I dropped a message, and I'm going to drop it in the chat again. Yesterday, Google announced their new project Astra, which is essentially an AI tutor. And you'll be interested in this, Shada, the capacity for it to, for example, look at a page of written work and interpret it, and also to highlight and circle things on that page, as well as give its own interpretation of what it is the student's doing, is phenomenal. And the reason why I'm excited about this is because the bot has been trained as an education aide, so it doesn't give answers. So you can ask a question or say, I need some help generally sorting something out, and it'll do that. But what it'll do is it'll pose questions to you on how you could lead to decision-making, critical thinking, ways of helping a student to make meaning of information rather than just give answers. And so it's a 2-minute video clip. It's an advert, I will agree. An EdTech committee must forgive me for putting up adverts without running it through them first. But I just found it really interesting that that people are seeing the need in education, but as an aid now to university learning. I was mentioning much earlier that the concept of the university will be dead and people will do MOOCs because they don't need to go to university anymore has fallen through because of their business model. That never really took off, whereas this is assistive in part of what it is that a university does. And also they're speaking to how you can personalize for your own course. It's, of course, also highly commercial and costs a very lot of money. But I think that we have to be sensitive to the idea that within months, the whole landscape is changing really fast. And we need to be open to the idea of how we can use it to better not only what the students are doing, but to make our lives easier too. And I didn't emphasize enough, I think, Richard and Chloe, how you've used what you've got with Phizzle Bot and how the students are responding to it by thinking, how can staff benefit as well? And by building Qbot to help them with variations in their questions, but also to help develop a technical standard for questions is absolutely phenomenal. And it's a great idea. And I also think that it helps staff, because when you have to think, well, I've got to generate 70 MCQs for a paper, that can drive you nuts, right? We've all been there. But once you're saying to this level, with this group, these are the questions that we want to ask, I think that that's very useful for staff too. So not just for planning a staff and thinking about how things could be taught, but also for augmenting what the students are asking and then thinking of ways how you can bridge that gap. So congratulations, very well done. And onwards and upwards. We're really happy to chat to you as you have your next set of ideas. So
Sure.
yeah, we really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye.
I'm going to say that their details are available if you do want to talk to them directly. But also, I think one of the things we need to keep a channel open with is the AI subgroup of the EdTech committee, which is currently being chaired by Dr. Gavin Owen. So it's a good idea to contact Gavin if you're thinking about now getting into this territory so that we can work at integrating what it is that everyone's doing and maybe take some of the financial load off as well. Thanks everybody for coming and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. We're looking forward to sharing more ideas with you next week.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Cheers.